Okay, good evening everyone, and thanks for coming along to our fourth and final STEM seminar for 2019. Before we get started this evening, I'd like to pay our respects to the peoples of the Kulin Nations on whose traditional estates we meet today, to their ancestors and to the children who we are educating into the future. I also acknowledge the other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present. So good evening everyone, my name's Lucas Johnson and I'm the Research and Development Manager in STEM Education here at the Faculty of Education at Monash University. And as I said, welcome to our final seminar for 2019. It's great to continually have great numbers, and I know we often see familiar faces of people who are coming back, so welcome to those people and also welcome to the people who are here for their first seminar this evening. Tonight's seminar is the lessons we can learn from early childhood education. So it's not all just for early childhood educators, but it's looking at how we can know that positive experiences in STEM in the early years promotes greater STEM engagement later in life. Lessons can be drawn from the early years sector about ways educators can promote positive learning experiences for students across other education contexts. So tonight we'll have a showcase of panellists from a range of different early learning settings to show how they have created positive STEM experiences for students. First of all, for those people who are here early enough, we had some students out the front presenting some of their posters from work they've done throughout the year. So they're students from John Monash Science School, and I think you'll agree with me, for those people who had a chance to talk to them, that they were very knowledgeable students and they had some amazing work to present. So here's our list of students there and some of the topics that they covered, and they did a fantastic job. So thank you, and can we give those students a round of applause, please? I'd just like to welcome Dr. Cathy Smith up to just quickly talk to you about our Graduate Certificate of STEM Education.
Thanks, Lucas. Thanks, everybody. As Lucas said, my name's Cathy Smith and I am the course leader of the Graduate Certificate of STEM Education. So what a perfect opportunity to raise your awareness of this course. On your table you'll find some leaflets about it, and I won't take very much of your time. It's an interesting course and we've had great feedback from participants in the course. You can see that there are 4 units that you undertake in this course, and it's all online. And so you can actually complete the course in 1 year by taking 2 units a semester. The introduction to STEM education, then you move on to content pedagogy and pedagogical content knowledge, you move into the digital foundations of STEM education, and we finish with contemporary practices in STEM education. Most of the participants in this course have been teachers or project officers or educators working in the area of STEM education, or teachers who've been tapped on the shoulders and found themselves as leaders of STEM within their school and are looking for some support. And so the course is designed to be as practical as we can make it for our students, and the feedback has been very good. So it was just an opportunity to raise your awareness of that program. The course will continue into 2020. So thanks, Lucas. Oh, you can send me an email if you'd like any further information.
Thanks, Kath. And Kath will be around later after the event if you'd like to try and catch her to ask her any questions about that course. As always, we encourage you to get involved in the conversation. So if you are on Twitter, we would encourage you to tag Monash Education in any tweets that you send out or post tonight, and also use the hashtag MonashSTEM so that people from home and people who are not here at the event are able to follow along and hear about some of the great ideas that will no doubt be presented tonight. So our presenters tonight. We have a range, as I said, of people out of early childhood education settings. So we have Anne Gordon, who is a lecturer in early years learning. We have Liz Borden, Director of Early Learning Centre at St Leonard's College, who will also be presenting with Carolyn Robinson, who is an early childhood educator at St Leonard's College. We also have Sarika, who will be supporting them in their presentation here. We have Laureate Professor Marilyn Fleer joining us all the way from Sydney. So we're going to take the big risk of getting her on Zoom. So we're hoping all technology goes to plan. But we also are lucky enough to have Maria Hatzigiani, who's the Senior Research Fellow on the Conceptual Play Lab project as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is Anne Gordon. Anne is a lecturer in early years learning at Box Hill Institute. She's had an extensive career working in early years learning, having previously managed a range of early learning centres and working as an early years learning consultant. She also has a background in secondary science and maths teaching. Anne is going to be sharing ideas with us this evening about how to enable positive learning experiences in STEM from a leadership point of view. So if we can welcome Anne, thank you.
I've got the other one. Okay, thanks Lucas, and thanks for welcoming me here tonight. I'm going to talk to you about how leadership can support STEM teaching in services. So, there we go. So in the last 25 years I've been in many directors' roles, consulting roles, area manager, all those sorts of roles. But all the way along, it's been also coaching people about their pedagogy. So first I'll share with you a little bit about who I am. During my childhood I was really, really curious, and I asked a lot of questions, which got me into a lot of trouble sometimes. And so that led me to seek out a career as a research scientist. So I studied here as Monash, and I worked for a few years in the research field, even a year here in the biochemistry department. But then my journey took me into teaching. So I spent a few years in secondary schools, and as a parent with young children, I ventured into early childhood, and I've been there ever since. As I said, I've spent 25 years managing services and consulting and doing a lot of training in my roles. So right now I'm working at Box Hill, and I'm working in the Bachelor of Early Childhood, and I teach a lot of the STEM subjects there as well as some other things. So that's a little bit about me. Now I've chosen a picture to share with you, and I'm wondering if you can see all the connections to STEM in that picture. There's a lot of them. So here's a small child, very curious, and curiosity is the most important thing. And he's used the books full of knowledge for an innovative purpose, to be able to see over the fence and the table. And I want you to keep in mind the importance of curiosity. So even though I've got that rich background in the sciences, this is all about you and how each of you can be leaders in your own roles. It doesn't matter what level you're at. You can be in early childhood or primary or secondary, but every one of us needs to be leaders to encourage the learning of STEM in young children. So what does it take for you to be a scientist? I didn't say a STEMinist, but let's encompass all of STEM in that. And over the years, these are the things that I think are important for us all. So if you're curious and you notice things and you spend your time questioning everything, coming up with theories, that's another really important part of STEM learning, and probably testing those theories and possibly coming up with some answers. But it's more the questions that are important than the answers. Okay, so the next slide, I want to share with you some observations from my experience working with adults. So obviously my teaching career has been all about all ages, right from birth to adults. So with the adults, these are some things that I've observed. People who select early childhood and primary teaching often come from a background in humanities disciplines. And there seems to be, this is just my observations, there seems to be quite often a lack of confidence in STEM areas. So therefore, they feel unsure about how to integrate STEM into what they're already doing. Okay? That's it. Often, but not always, often the science offered in early childhood is a bit limited. It can be a science table, a few things to explore, or some science activities, something like that. I've seen a lot of floating and sinking, a lot of magnetism, and sometimes other things, but they're the main things that you see a lot of. So, what I think is becoming important and more acknowledged and tonight's an example of that, is that increasing awareness for people that STEM is everywhere and every day and in absolutely everything you do. So what I think I'd like to see happen in the early years settings and everywhere else is to change our mindset that STEM is more than memorising just facts. It's actually an approach, a way of thinking, an exploratory and an investigative approach. Okay. Now, I found a slide that really, I thought, showed a little bit about my leadership style in STEM. Oops. Here we go. Now, those who know me well might think that the fine system is a little bit the wrong way around here. But if I was to be fined every time I said a swear word, that might be the number of coins I'd end up with in the jar. But the number of times I talk about science when I wasn't asked in the workplace, not in a training session, and I'd be absolutely broke if I had to put a coin in the jar when that happened to me. And how do I know that? Because often there'd be lots of eye rolling from people and, oh, she's not talking about science again. But anyway, that's part of what I did. So tonight I'm going to show you 3 ways that you can be a leader in STEM where you're working. And it's not limited to early childhood. Any setting that you work in with any age children, I think these 3 ways would be really appropriate. Now, this picture, probably a common scenario in an early childhood setting. There's lots of play spaces set up. This one's dramatic play, and these children are engaged in some doctor play with what looks like a very sick dinosaur there. There's other areas in the room for those who don't work in early childhood, sometimes block play, story time. Absolutely anything can be brought into an early childhood classroom. So what I want you to think about now is finding the STEM that's already there, okay? So how about taking a little time in your table groups there? Think about a play space if you're in early childhood. I've made some suggestions there. Or if you're not in early childhood, think of a context. Luna Park is absolutely amazing for physics or sports or vehicles. Think technology, things that students, the children love. Just talk to the people on your table for about 30 seconds and see if you can think of all the possible STEM concepts that might be embedded in the area that you've chosen. I'll give you about 30 seconds. Okay, that's 30 seconds there. All right. Now, did people find that easy or hard? Any suggestions, comments? Did people find that easy or difficult? Pretty easy? And that was only in 30 seconds. So if you had a little bit of a group meeting or a group planning time in the course of your planning, it shouldn't be too difficult to come up with STEM concepts in almost everything you do. So that's your first tip from me tonight. As a leader in teaching STEM, find the STEM in everything you do, from meal times to outdoor play to sports, anything else. Okay, let's have a look at the second one. The other thing that sometimes people have lost is the ability to wonder, the curiosity factor. So sometimes it's good to just sit back and think, what do you wonder about? Right? Now, I've got a short video I'm going to show you here, and I've got an example of the object in my pocket, and it's a bit small for a big group, so the video will be better. Get it out of my pocket. So there's a little object, if you like, called a rattleback. Some of you may have seen one, but hopefully most of you haven't. So let's have a look at this video. And again, I want you to talk to the people in your group and find out as many questions, think of as many questions as you can. Questions, not answers. I don't want to ask you how you think it works or why it does it, but you ask the questions. So it's the questions that are important. So let's watch the video, and it's only 30 seconds, so while that's playing, talk to each other about some questions. What do you wonder about? Okay, so what questions do you have about it? What did you notice? What did you notice when they spun the thing one way and then they spun it the other way? Talk in your groups and see if you can come up with some questions. Okay, everybody. So, what are some things people wondered about? Would anyone like to share with us? What did you wonder about that little gadget called a rattleback? Yes?
Why is it not turning the way I wanted it to?
Why is it not turning the way I wanted it to? That's a very good question. Any more questions? I'll take one more. Yes? What's it made from? There's another question. So, with STEM learning, it's not always the answers that are important, but the questions, because the questions get you thinking and wondering. And the other thing with this second suggestion I've got for you is that finding quirky objects to share with the children you work with has been another thing, and the staff that I work with. So I used to have on my desk at work a tray full of different things, something like this. Have people seen these sorts of things? Okay. I haven't bought a lot because the big room, it's a bit hard to show, but some of these things you can pick up at the Australian Geographic shop. Seen this one before? Okay. So this leads the children and the adults you work with to come up with questions and be a bit curious. So there's the second leadership suggestion for you. And the third one, what's happening? That's it. Okay, so noticing. Sometimes we miss the obvious. Here's a playroom. Maybe someone's gone to a lot of trouble to set up lots of equipment and things for the children to play with, which is fantastic. But I walked into a playroom where I was working probably a year or two ago, and I noticed a rainbow on the floor, as bright as this one, and nobody in the room had noticed it. And I was really a bit surprised. So I drew their attention to this rainbow, but I didn't leave it at that. I left them all with a challenge. I communicated with everybody in the service, and I said, how many different ways can you make a rainbow? And I was really pleasantly surprised because all the different classrooms got involved in quite a few activities around making rainbows in different ways. And this interest lasted quite a few weeks at that time. So they're my three things to leave you with to be STEM leaders. Find the STEM in everything you already do. Notice, be curious. Question, form theories. Share your wonderings. What do you wonder about? And for me, what I like to do is find quirky objects to wonder about and bring them in, share them with the team. Okay, so you can start tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Anne, for your presentation. It's great to show that everyone can be a STEM leader when you are in that sort of, put yourself in that setting. I'd now like to welcome Sarika to the stage to introduce our next speakers.
Thanks, Lucas. So the next presentation is from St Leonard's College Early Learning Centre. We have the Centre Director, Miss Liz Borden, and the ELC4, which is the 4-year-old Ginkgo classroom teacher, Miss Caroline Robinson. Liz, do you want to come? So Liz has been an early childhood educator for 30 years. She has worked in many different settings, both here and in the international context. Liz has been with St. Leonard's College for past 15 years. And Caroline has broad experiences and expertise as an early childhood educator past 12 years. And she has been a Monash alumni, so welcome back to Monash. And she completed her Bachelor of Early Childhood in 2003.
That's right.
So welcome on board, and I hand it to Liz.
Hello everybody. I thought I'd just begin tonight by explaining the context of our Early Learning Centre. We have a centre of 84 3 to 5-year-olds in 4 different classrooms. So one of the most important things I think is that we are a Reggio Emilia inspired centre, which of course promotes wonder, curiosity, creativity and inquiry learning. Through the thoughtful environments and provocations that are planned by our educators, and including the planning and ideas from our children and our families, of course. So after participating in a research project about preschool teachers' beliefs and pedagogical practices in the integration of technology with Sarika last year, we did identify a need for us to be exploring and embedding more digital technologies into our program. The everyday science, of course, was present, but to go deeper with the children's learning was important, and we thank Sarika for introducing us to that. So the project this year allowed for building capacity in our educators, which was very important. The introduction of technological innovations, such as the various robots, were integrated into the children's play-based learning environment and demonstrated how their cognitive thinking can really flourish. Another strong part of our pedagogy is project learning. This allows for collaborative learning, exciting and authentic and engaging learning opportunities, which allows children to confidently put forward their own theories and learn from each other. It allows for learning how to learn and fosters conceptual understanding. Also, a strong part of the Reggio approach is using the 100 languages, which provides all children their own way to demonstrate their thinking through different modes of expression, which you'll see Caroline explain later. The importance of documentation and collaboration amongst educators and reflective practice informs our future planning and how to extend and challenge our children's thinking. So as the project unfolded, we allowed time for children, which is one of the really most important things. This took months and months, and we didn't expect that, but we were able to, in our setting, continue the children's opportunities. We observed how children are protagonists in their own learning, experimenting and questioning each other. The children's shared interactions supported creative learning within their context of play. So I'll pass over to Caroline now, who was the educator in the ELC4 classroom, who worked directly with the children every day, and the amazing robot city that emerged, led by the children's ideas.
Thank you, everyone. So a question that I hope we're all asking tonight is, do robots enable STEM learning in an ELC? The answer is absolutely, and in ways we didn't expect. What I'll talk to you about tonight is that the robots not only prove to be excellent teachers in the practical aspects of robotics, but also in creating an environment for other skills and experiences as well. Initially, our planning, our program aims to build upon the natural curiosity, wonder, and strengths that children bring to school. And in the classroom, we aim to take the children's lead and capitalise on their interests and experience and excitement. We implement an inquiry-based learning program where we provide time, as Liz said, space and freedom for the children to engage, experiment and interact with robots. We allow opportunities for collaborative, imaginative and play-based learning. So we started with Botley the robot, and we introduced him to the children as they arrived to the ELC one morning. It was a really exciting provocation that ignited everyone's curiosity, the children's and the parents and ours. We then proceeded to record the children's prior knowledge and have a discussion about their experiences with robots and understand what they already knew. Then we gave them instructions on how to operate Botley the robot. Very quickly the children learnt how to code, use technical language, navigate maps and to solve problems. This is Botley. Initially, the children's engagement with the robots focused on what they can do or cannot do. An example of this was when we had a discussion as to whether the robots can dance. The children became scientific thinkers, working out theories and ways to make the robots do what they wanted. Some thought they couldn't dance because they don't have arms and legs. But then Minnie discovered they can with a remote control. Koji. Through Koji the robot, children learnt to code with emojis. They explored the Koji programming interface to devise and test their own code sequences. They could make Koji move, laugh, sing, or even poop, as we all know with emojis can do. Learning new scientific language and information became a commonplace for the children. So they learnt words such as coding, Bluetooth, connections, programming, reset, clear, circuits, transmit, remote controls, connectors, solar panels, and it was endless. We read fiction and non-fiction books about robotics, about coding and electronics to help build the children's knowledge. The children also acted out being a robot during their drama sessions. There were plenty of opportunities for problem solving. We would observe the children's play and scaffold learning opportunities through questions. For example, here's Ava and Minnie creating a map for Botley to follow. But Botley wasn't following their map. So we asked, why do you think it's not working? What do you think you could do to get Botley to follow that map? And through their analysis, they realised that the line they were drawing wasn't quite thick enough. So they made the line thicker and sure enough, it worked. Mapping and navigation. So the robots naturally encouraged navigation, which required lots of planning and coding to get the robots to go from point A to B. The children built and navigated their own roadways, created maps, built tunnels and ramps for the robots. This provided opportunities for problem solving, collaboration and peer learning. After a short time, the program started to head off in an unexpected direction. The children stopped treating the robots like toys and what you can do with them, but began treating them like little pets or friends. They started to get worried about whether they were lonely and comfortable, and some of the children wanted to build homes for the robots. The children engaged... Oh, hang on a minute. Sorry, we might play this first. Thank you.
It's too big.
Okay. So the children really engaged with this idea and they decided that they wanted to build a community. Hang on, I think we skipped one back there. Oh, that's okay. Let's go forward. We used throughout the project, the children were exposed to many mediums and explore and express their thinking and understanding of robots. They created box constructions, paper clay robots, using cogs loose parts, paintings and drawings of robots. There's some more pictures of that. But eventually the children decided that they needed to build a city for the robots. So the whole class became involved, groups were formed to build different areas of the city, which you can see just over here. So the project was a very collaborative effort and it took on a life of its own. It really has been an amazing experience to see the curiosity and learning the children have shown throughout the project. Oops, so I'll just go back to that one. Documentation. The documentation of learning included discussions, observations of the children's interactions with the robots, capturing conversations, photographs, videos, drawings, paintings and journals to parents. Our documentation serves as a way for the teachers and educators to listen and to understand what the children know and are trying to find out. So reflecting on all of that is the way that helps to provide the best environment we can provide to deepen their inquiry. This is what informs our practice and decisions about the group project and where it will go. We then had a Robot City celebration. We invited all the parents and siblings to come and experience this exciting journey the children had been on. Celebration night was buzzing. The children had made little robot cookies to hand out and were ready to give demonstrations on how to use robots. Every part of the city was connected with roadways, including coding cards for the robots. So it's obvious from that the robots have had a really big impact in our classroom and on the children's STEM learning experiences and outcomes. They now have a broader scientific language and understanding of robotics. They've benefited from experiencing a shared endeavour to create the Robot City. We hope to see Botley back in our classroom next year. I'd really like to say a huge thank you to Dr. Sarika. We're really grateful for the opportunity to be part of the project with Monash and to Blake Cutler for their expertise and guidance and the supply of technology throughout the project. And thank you also to Liz Borden for her ideas and insights into children's learning. I hope everybody gets to play with robots soon. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Caroline and Liz, for giving us first-hand insights into a beautiful robotic creation. I mean, this was absolutely phenomenal from 4 to 5-year-olds. And this does not happen overnight. Not sure how much time I have, but I hope to still continue. Perfect, thank you. So, tonight we're talking about conditions for positive STEM-based play experiences where we have immersed these children into robotic artifacts. So this city emerged because of their curiosity. They started wondering, and Anne has wonderfully put together that it starts with curiosity and asking questions. So, the first condition that actually comes out from this evidence-based project is to embrace a culture of inquiry. What is that culture of inquiry? It is about supporting and encouraging children to ask questions. You may even want to start with a word wall. I'm sure everybody has heard of a word wall in a primary, secondary context. We tend to do that even in early childhood context, and sometimes we call it as a parking lot. So where children park their questions. And that eventually can emerge into an unexpected project, like you just see here. Building of cafes and farms, and this is something that the children were wondering about. Oh, the robots are going to die. We need to charge them, because one of the technologies we introduced was the Little Bits. You saw the electronic coding? So Little Bits has technology where you operate them. It's magnetic blocks. It's almost like Legos, Lego Boost and so on. So it was a blend of physical, so you can see all these physical resources, and Anne has put it together. You have all these resources in your environment. It's every day out there. So it's just about putting these technologies, immersing the children. It's not about staring at an iPad. It's not about sitting there for hours coding, trying to, put emotions together and not getting anywhere. Of course, we all want to have the robots to, there's a toilet actually, that's where the robots go to poo, because that actually came from the emoji that they were trying to code with Koji, the robot. So it's about encouraging children to be creative and initiate their questions. Like I said, question starters, and that can probe into, their curiosity about, go and start tinkering with these robots and asking these really good questions, which then as a teacher, so I thought Caroline she's done a fantastic job in, those guided interactions and getting children to wonder about, I wonder, if the battery is going to die, what's going to happen next? What do we want to do? There you go. We've got a battery world now for Koji and Botley to go and recharge themselves. And if they're tired, they can go to the cafe, they can go to the farm, they can go to the beach for some, swimming lessons to rejuvenate themselves. So these are the kind of conversations that came along with these kind of wanderings. And learning is richer and more effective when it is done over a period of time. It's wonderful to have a one-off table experiment. However, how is that going to translate into an inquiry project? This project was about 8 to 10 weeks, and it's still ongoing. ELC for Moreton Bay Room is actually now experiencing virtual reality. So we're getting them to think about how robots can survive on planets. So that's the only question starter we put forward, and we will see what they come up with. And lastly, do not panic. It's only STEM. We can always have a STEM party at the end. So the mantra is, yes, develop a culture of inquiry. Get your children, your students into the STEM mood. They are curious. They will keep wondering. It's endless. So that's where you pick up on the STEM mood. The project often starts with a particular question, and then children's theories, their ideas, their experimentation, their responses, their collaborative inquiry, their higher order thinking, they all translate into these kind of physical and virtually blended STEM experiences. Project Harvard Zero recommends a thinking routine, which is very common in primary and secondary contexts. So here's one. You've got see, think, wonder, and create. It's not only to wonder, but what's next? What do you want to create? There you go. That's blend off using physical and virtual play spaces. And towards the end, just enjoy the journey, the interactions, the creativity with your students and children, and have a STEM party like how we did at the celebration night. So I think that's the end of our presentation. We went over time, but it should be okay.
Thank you very much, Sarika, and thanks again to Liz and Caroline for showing us that robots can be a great start for some really authentic STEM experiences for our students. Now, finally, I'd like to introduce our last speakers for this evening. So we have Laureate Professor Marilyn Fleer, who I mentioned will be joining us via Zoom. And we also have with her Dr. Maria Hatzigiani, who's going to be supporting the presentation here. And Sarika mentioned the idea of physical and virtually blended STEM experiences. We're hoping to give you one of those right now with Marilyn from Sydney and Maria here with us in person. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Maria, I think, to get us started, or Marilyn.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks, Marilyn.
Fantastic. So Maria and I are co-presenting tonight, and my apologies for not being there, but I'm on a training course here in Sydney, so otherwise I would have been with you. But I'm very happy to have this possibility to join the evening and to be a part of this very exciting event. So on the first slide, Maria's going to, I want to first of all acknowledge our team in the Conceptual Play Lab, and we're going to be sharing with you today together, Maria and I, as representatives of our Play Lab. We want to connect with what you've already experienced already in relation to Anne's presentation and Sarika and her team as well. And what we want to do is share with you after that, share with you a little bit about what we've been doing in our Conceptual Play Lab and where we're taking it. And as part of that, Maria's going to share with you our evidence-based model and show you a video, a very short video clip to orient us to the very beginnings, because you've seen some fabulous examples of STEM with what looks like 4 and 5 year olds that we saw, but also with Anne's presentation, the possibilities for even older children, but maybe younger, 3-year-olds perhaps, or 2-year-olds, depending on what kind of leadership role that you want to take. And also what we wanted to do in sharing with you this video is show how it all begins even with infants and toddlers. And so we're going to share a little video of what that looks like. It's with such a young age. So Maria, if we can coordinate now and move on to our good friend Vygotsky. So what was very interesting to hear was some very important things that Anne spoke about, which is actually about and connects very much with the what Liz was sharing about from St Leonard's as well, around this provocation. So the provocation to inspire people to be thinking about, and children to be thinking about primarily, of course that's what we're interested in, children to primarily be stimulated to be thinking and become curious and inquirers. And what was beautiful about what Anne was sharing was that it links very nicely with important work that's been done over time around discovery learning. So that is about how an object or a moment in time can inspire something, and children can seek out and try and discover what's going on. And what sits under this discovery learning has been shown over time to be very important, because it's about children connecting with things to build their curiosity, to build their imagination, to set them forth. But sometimes we don't always know what it is that they're connecting up with. So when they take objects from the science table or the object that's been put out as a provocation, we sometimes don't know what their thinking is, because in this kind of learning, which is really important, the role of the adults is not as central. The materials become very important. And so a child who takes an object and takes a magnet, for instance, and then has some metals that they explore, which could be part of what was being experienced at the science table, might come to a conclusion about what's happening, but we don't always know. So this then lends us nicely into what we heard Liz and Sarika speaking about too, which was very much about how the provocation then can go the next step. And when we start to explore the next step, we can start to follow and take a more active role. So depending on your philosophy about children's learning and your provocation, where it might go, when we start to look at theories around children's learning, and we know that there is the inspired approach of Reggio Emilia, which of course is focused very much on project. And I think what's been important about that St Leonard's has taken forward is that the project approach here is very much about engaging in some deep STEM learning. And in the engagement of STEM learning, it goes beyond noticing what might be possibilities to actually planning some important series of provocations from what I heard. And this is also links with some really important work that's come out of the constructivist tradition and more, social constructivist tradition, theoretically, because I've been asked to make some connections here, theoretically. And this work's really significant because it draws attention to the nature of what is it that children already know. And so the beginning point is tapping into their STEM thinking, and the curiosity and the provocation actually helps stimulate that. So it gives them something to engage with and then to document what it is that they know. And from that to what are they curious about? So the kinds of questions that children are asking, to document those and then to build the conditions around that to support the STEM thinking to go forward. So the role of the adult becomes really important. And as the St Leonard's team mentioned, time really matters here. So this is something that's not a quick one-off. So in that context, we want to, Maria and I want to share with you then another theoretical tradition. That's not to say any of these are right or wrong, they're just different lenses that we're bringing, so different glasses that we might have with how we're thinking about how to take STEM forward. And for people in the group that are at Monash, you will have different levels of comfort zones around and different philosophies and beliefs. So this is about matching or stretching your thinking around this. So we work from a cultural historical tradition, and in a cultural historical tradition in our particular area, we are very much focused on play-based learning, as most early childhood settings are. In our Conceptual Play Lab in particular, we're very interested in how play creates imaginary conditions where children take a stick and they change its meaning into a hobby horse and they ride around the room. But also they can take a stick and it can become a ruler and they can engage in measurement. So development of children's imagination in play connects so thoroughly with children's imagination in STEM. And so I wanted to sort of emphasise that's kind of where we're coming from our perspective. So how we create imaginary situations, and in the imaginary situations we change the meaning of these objects and actions. And this is really, really important in STEM because if you think about someone like Barbara McClintock, who changed the course of genetics as a famous scientist, who used to imagine herself going down the microscope into the Petri dish, examining the genetic materials, and then imagining how things were going on there in relation to the cornfields that she was tending during the day. She was bringing powerful ability to imagine. And we see young children who are really interested in very small things, as we know, who may not have the tools, certainly the eyesight, to look into the microscope easily. But iPads and various other things, in the way that Sarika was emphasising when you have the blended approach, gives tools to actually start to magnify. But also, it's not just that, it's also the imagining of it. It's actually in the imagining in what's in the pond water. And if we have the opportunity to look at what might be in pond water by using digital means of a digital microscope, then this gives these possibilities. And then this gives new ways of thinking about the environment in which they're interacting. So that's just as very quick. But Maria, if we could move to the next slide, is that one of the things that we've noticed about what we understand about STEM and early childhood is that a lot of the models of teaching STEM have come primarily from research that's actually been based in non-play-based settings. And this has meant early childhood educators have had to do two things. One is to engage with STEM, but also engage with engage with how do you teach it in a play-based setting, because it's different to a school-based setting, because imagination in play is the context in which these very young children are engaged in. Educators create these imaginary conditions, they give opportunities for children to play, but also within that they create these powerful learning experiences. So what's happened in the past is the literature has suggested that we blame teachers for not teaching enough STEM. But in fact, the problem's been we haven't had the right tools. Marie, if we could move on to the next slide. So what we've learned over a period of time at Monash University with the research that we've done is that when we look at STEM in science, one of the key things that's come out that we've learned about is that by developing children's capacity to imagine more and to engage in drama of some kind, they can embody some of the things. And you see on the screen there, when children see in everyday situations spiders, then they can go out and research spiders. So a little bit like Sarika was saying about expanding and developing projects around children's interests and inquiries. But then the dramatisation of what does that mean, because a lot of spiders in particular are very dramatic and can be very exciting, but can also be a bit frightening. So it's starting to think about beyond cognition and thinking about how emotions, how you feel about your learning, how you feel about the content of what you're learning actually influences how you actually take things up. So we go to the next slide. So we've learned that from our research. We've also learned from our technologies research, that was science, now we're looking at technologies. So this is the design and technology area. What we've learned in our research is one of the toughest things for children to be able to do at this young age, and I've seen it further into primary school with research I've done there as well, is that children often see in their everyday lives, children's books are oriented to looking at things from a front view perspective, but it's really hard to do design work if you only have that orientation. So moving children from a front view to a plan view becomes really important. And when children can draw from a plan view, then they can start to design really interesting things that they can build, or they can even problem solve and then do modelling around it. So this is, and once children know how to do that in the block area to do design work, and you saw some beautiful examples with the mapping, obviously from a plan view, this is orienting the children to be thinking about that. In our research, we've done things like having a bird fly over the three little pigs' home, and what can the birds see from the plan view perspective, to get children to think about that and then to start to do planning. So Marie, if we could move on, I'm really skipping through a lot of research here. Engineering, some of you think, engineering, a whole new area. There's such interest in engineering at the moment, and engineering is a very important area because we know, particularly for girls, and we know in STEM already, that we're losing the girls along the way. And engineering is a green field for us in Australia. It's been going on for a while in the US, and the Australian government's very interested in engineering. So what does this really mean, and what does it look like for young children? So Marie, if we could go on to the next slide. Then if we take storying, so remember I mentioned we learned from our research before that that it was important to engage emotionally and in our science, but also to engage in dramatisation. Well, when we start to build on educators' strengths in storytelling and story reading as an area that we're very skilled in the early childhood area, then this story here of Robin Hood starts to set up all sorts of interesting social questions about and values and issues and so on. But it also lends itself very nicely to the project worked in the way that the St Leonard's group were talking about, but more in the context of how we've been doing this, is that the story creates social questions about how to save the villagers who are very poor and starving, and the redistribution of wealth. Mary, if we could go to the next slide, please. Then actually designing some solutions. So entering into the imaginary space, going back in time to the time of Robin Hood in the forest, actually role-playing this, being out there, exploring it, but visiting the imaginary castle, going across the moat, trying to work out how to get the treasure out, and then realising you need to go back to the time of the kindergarten, to the preschool, and to begin to design some engineering solutions to how to get the treasure out of the castle, leading to a huge engagement with girls' interest in STEM. And we know that from other research that when social questions arise, we engage the girls and we also engage the boys, but we don't lose the girls, and they need engineering solutions to solve these problems. Maria, if we could go to the next slide. So this takes us to have very, very quickly, and then I'm passing on to Maria, just to say that what has led us to this is that we have actually had the opportunity for some funding for the next 5 years, and the team that I showed a picture of at the beginning, and Maria and I are representing, is to take this research forward because we have an evidence-based model that we've developed. Maria, just if we go to the next slide. And part of our research, is to follow. Oh, this is really confusing me. This is going backwards and forwards on the screen here. I'm hoping you can stay focused on it. Is that we have 3 pillars of research, and Maria's going to talk to the third one, which is our evidence-based model, which has come from a lot of this research that I've quickly summarised. But we're also following infants as they become toddlers, as they become preschoolers, because we recognise we don't know enough about the phenomenon and the interests of infants and in the STEM area, and we want to build curriculum that will be more in tune with their interests and their ways of thinking and how that changes over time. And the second one is to work with families, because we know some families promote really exciting STEM opportunities for their children, which are about curiosity and wondering and all of the things that have been mentioned already. But Maria, I'll hand over to you now if you want to go to the next slide.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. We don't have enough time, but I will try to run as quickly as possible. From my years as an early childhood teacher, I work with Marilyn. She has developed this amazing model, which is all based on play, the cornerstone of learning. It's all about integration, and we love early integration in early childhood. We don't like working in silos. And we also like hands-on and playful activities. We also we know how important our work is to develop positive dispositions for young children, not only in STEM, but in everything, really. So this play worlds approach that Marilyn has developed and has published widely has 5 steps, as you can see here. I'm not going to have time to explain everything in detail, but you can find all our videos and resources in our website. We are very active in social media as well, and you can join our newsletter, but also YouTube and everywhere else. I'll talk about it really quickly. So these are the 5 characteristics, as you can see, the 5 stages of actually creating a conceptual play world where you can embrace STEM. The first one, really quickly, is to select a story. The second one is to design a conceptual play world space. And then you have to also think creatively how you're going to enter and exit with the children. You're part of that imaginary condition and situation as a teacher. You're always following the children. You are at the same level with the children. You're not above, you're not below. You are learning with them. Entering and exiting the conceptual play world space. This planning, this is where our magic spells become alive, in my view, is our intentional teaching, is our effort, is our understanding of teaching and how we're going to implement it, which is different every year, every month, depending on our children and their interests. And finally, you have to also, like I said before, plan the teaching interactions. You are learning with your children. You are with them in the whole situation. You're traveling with them. I also have a video, I don't know whether it's less than 2 minutes with infants and toddlers because I didn't have enough time to explain all the stages. Maybe the video can do the work. Is that all right? So we can play the video.
In a science, technology and engineering play world, infants wander, imagine and explore, and educators create conditions for their learning.
Based on research, this video is an example of an evidence-based model of play pedagogy designed to support and promote the exploration and learning of our youngest scientists, engineers and technologists.
We can help you design your own STEM play world. When teachers design imaginary play situations, they support children's sense of wonder and exploration.
We know from research that imagination and play is critical for the learning of STEM concepts.
But how do we set up a STEM play world for infants and toddlers at your centre? Let's look at how the educators at Windermere Early Learning Centre set up their conceptual play world for young infants, toddlers and the under threes. The educators collectively chose the story of Possum in the House by Kirsten Jensen. In the story, children experience the drama of a naughty possum going all over the house. This story was the starting point to turn the whole childcare centre into a possum adventure. The big problem was, how do we get the possum out of the house? To answer this, there were all sorts of things to find out about possums. What sounds do they make? What do they eat? How do they eat? Where should they live? How do you catch a possum? What's the best way to relocate them with kindness?
You can find the longer versions of the video in YouTube if you like, and you can also join our Facebook page. And Marilyn has also developed a free app for educators to download as a research tool to be able to document children's learning and children's imagination during the play worlds, but even outside the play worlds. And our website is here. If you just Google Conceptual Play Worlds, you'll find it straight away, and social media, Twitter and Facebook. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry we took a little bit more than expected.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Okay, thank you, Maria, and thank you, Marilyn. It is now time to invite our panellists back down to the front and have some questions for these people. So, panellists, can I get you to bring your own chair down, please? And we'll set you up along here. And if anybody's got a question from the audience or indeed at home, feel free to either pop your hand up or type it into the discussion page, and we'll send Jennifer or Jen will be running around with a microphone, and Jared, will be running around with a microphone. So please wait for the microphone to come to you before asking a question.
One hand. I don't know. I don't think it's on.
Okay. You can either direct your question directly to one of our panellists or to the panel in general. So does anybody have a question? We've got one right at the back there. Jared, we're going to make you... Oh, Jen, going up there.
Anne, I'm a transfusion medicine scientist, and I've administered kindergartens for 16 years, and I have two daughters who are both studying science and education here at Monash University. So I think I might have done all right in educating and promoting scientific thinking as the lens that one enjoys the most for living life. But I wanted to know, what were the barriers that you have for people changing adult behaviour to actually try on the lens of a scientist in terms of viewing the world around us, and what sort of follow-up is being done or planned from these innovative early childhood interventions to see whether they actually do make a difference?
So from my point of view, working in a range of services, it's an ongoing work in progress, I think. In terms of barriers, it's mostly the confidence to notice and be curious, and probably the experience of a lot of people who might feel they've had negative experiences of STEM learning in their lives might be centred around difficult vocabulary or memorising facts or mathematics that doesn't make sense to them, perhaps. So by showing them simple things, by showing the adults, and this is where I've changed my focus over the last sort of 20 plus years, is to helping the adults feel that confidence to be able to tackle STEM for themselves and see it all around them all the time. Does that help with your question?
Sorry, that was just the long-term
The
follow-up.
long-term follow-up, please.
So it's probably something others can answer better than I can in the research field, probably, because I've been working directly mostly in services. So I can only suggest that it is ongoing, and I think that as new educators come into the field, new teachers who may not have a STEM background, I think the support will have to come there in the future. So has anyone else got any?
Can I just add on, like Liz did mention, it's ongoing progress. As research, you start with the educators' attitude, their beliefs. So that's what the step one was with our project in 2018, was to figure out what the educator actually wants to learn. So it comes from, like as you saw, it comes from within the children. It has to come from within the teacher. So, and St Leonard's has a good policy of shared understanding and shared learning, and great leadership, of course. Then, and, it's the holistic support and welcoming research partnerships, and with research as well. There's ongoing support, like supplying the technologies and so on. And it's a holistic package, so research partnerships, and we do value our partnerships with schools, and we do value where they want to see themselves go, and based on that we develop the interventions. We just don't tell them, here is a curriculum plan, here you go and test it out. It all comes from them and their philosophies. So and we try our best for ongoing support.
Okay.
Can I give a response too? Is that possible?
Absolutely.
Okay. Just to say, the research that we've done has shown over time that the things that make the biggest difference is actually having for us at least, having a model, an evidence-based model. So a model that actually works with educators' strengths rather than a deficit view. And the strengths are that early childhood educators are experts in children's development, absolutely know how to read children superbly. It's part of their education and their degree qualification particularly, but also in TAFE qualifications. So that's really important. And so it's working with their strength. The second strength that we found is that they're very good, and I mentioned that, they're very good with literacy. So feel very comfortable with literacy, and therefore stories provide a really important narrative and glue to take children from one day to the next and to build their scientific engineering, design and technology, mathematics learning forward in a way that keeps that narrative alive, because it's very hard for a 4-year-old to have a one-off experience on one day and then to sort of reconnect with it the next day and build on it. So we found that really, really matters. And the final thing that really matters is that early childhood educators are experts in children's play, and this model that we have is based on research that's come from that context, and so therefore it again speaks to their strengths. So it's working with the strengths of adults rather than working with a deficit view that they can't do something or they don't know how to do it or whatever, which is what the last 20 years the literature's been full of, and it's made no difference at all. But our research that we're taking forward, we know it's been built on research. It talks to the educator's strengths. And we're exploring over the next 5 years, 4 to 5 years, actually what that looks like across Australia. So we will have more evidence, longitudinal evidence for you to say how that might be slightly tweaked or look different, depends on cultural communities and so on.
Thank you, Marilyn. We do have a question from someone joining us on Zoom. So, Chantel?
Yeah, we've got quite a lot of people on Zoom at the moment, joining you, Marilyn, as well. But there's been a lot of discussions on the chat room here. We've got a question from Shanae. They're asking if my early learning centre is not supported implementation of digital technology in learning. Is there any way I could incorporate STEP teaching in curriculum? I don't know what's wrong with this.
Anyone from the panel here?
I can respond. Oh, Maria, you go first.
Of course, because technology is not only about the digital, first of all, okay? Technology is everything that is man-made. So it can be, a knife can be technology. I used to say to my university students that knife is a technology and you cannot blame a knife when you commit a murder, for example, okay? You cannot blame technology. It's how you use technology that has to be blamed. So, of course, they can do STEM, even if they don't have digital technologies or if their philosophies, are not aligned with that, because they can do a lot of other things. So that's my answer. Marilyn, I don't know whether you would like to add anything.
No, I think you answered it beautifully. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you. We probably have time for one more question. We'll go... Chantel's got her hand up again, someone from Zoom. We'll do one from the room and then we'll come back and do one last one from Zoom.
Oh. Hello, okay. I was just wondering, what are the biggest barriers to translation of research into schools, and what is a solution you can propose?
Can I respond to that?
Of course you can.
Okay. That is a beautiful question, because I think that's one of the most important things. Over the years, the thing that I've noticed that is very important has been we don't often know, like tonight was a good example of what it can look like in a service, in a centre, in a classroom. And unless you can see what it looks like, it's difficult to imagine yourself doing it. And these examples are really inspiring because they give you the space to imagine other things that are connected to your own settings. So I say that as a lead into the fact that translation of research is incredibly important, and it is important because by producing videos like the ones that you've seen tonight, it is an example of the translation of the research, and it's taking the evidence and looking at how can you package it, if you like, in such a way that others can feel inspired by it. So the taster, for example, from the Windermere, as Maria nicely showed, is just a taster because we actually work through all the characteristics through not only our Facebook, not only through Twitter, because I tweet a lot, and I also send out even minier versions of the video. These are all really important things. And so when we receive grants to do the research, of course, we never have enough money, but there are lots of people and lots of organisations who are really happy to support this kind of translation work. And I think it's an important thing that Monash does to take through our marketing team, through Seshna and her colleagues, to take really good material and good research and turn it into material that can be really engaging for the community and make a really big difference. So these things really matter for us in research, but they matter in terms of where I began, imagining what some of these things, STEM looks like in practice. And it can be very simple, but it can also be really complex, as we saw tonight with the St Leonard's example, which is a very beautiful example of that.
Okay, thanks, Marilyn. And we're going to go to our last question from one of our Zoom participants.
Yeah, we've got Melinda on the line. We've actually got a whole heap of questions here, but we might have to take that offline and try and answer them after the event. So we've got Melinda here who's asking a specific question for Caroline and Liz. How did you start in your own knowledge of robotics and coding? Did you play first, or did you read up on it first, or something else?
Go ahead.
Well, the way that we started, as we sort of said before, was we wanted to embed some more digital technologies. We had, science was certainly something that we embraced within our program, everyday science, like the noticing of rainbows, for example, those sorts of things. So taking it deeper, and with the help of Sarika, we did that. But we always start with what the children know first. That's a really important part of our approach. So we began by asking, what is a robot and what does a robot do? So making sure we're starting the children and extending and really having high expectations of what they can do, rather than starting down before, with introducing things that they already know. So that's a really important part. And then, we allowed the children to play.
And we were also learning with the children. So you asked, what knowledge did I have of robotics? To be honest, not a lot. And I was learning along with them. So together I had a quick little session with Sarika maybe the day before and how to use some of the robots. But I was learning with the children. We were experimenting and playing. I sort of showed them quickly how to use the remote controls or various devices, and we all were learning at the same time.
Can I just add on? So the beauty of the project was we were all learning together, including myself. So as the children's inquiries came along about inquiring solar panels, batteries and so on, so that made us come together and think, how do we move their thinking forward? So of course I go back to the TLS. I must admit that the TLS team has helped us a lot in putting these technologies together and back and forth, learning myself at home. I have a 4-year-old. And my husband he's he looks after my son, and I'm playing with my son, trying to get the technologies into my head myself, and then trying to play with the children together. So it's a holistic package. We learn together, because trust me, digital technologies is like it's changing every day. So it's just about immersing and embracing that it's out here. How we're going to use it. In terms of, as Marilyn has beautifully put it, the imagination, the imaginary situations, the inquiry, the wonderings. It wasn't solely depending on coding and robotics and so on. The theories and interests came from them, and we all learned together as the project progressed.
Okay, thank you. I think that brings us to an end of our Q&A session, but no doubt the panellists will be happy to take some of your questions after the session finishes. And I know Marilyn's quite active on Twitter, so I'm sure she'll be happy for you to contact her on Twitter if you have any questions for her. Before we finish up tonight, have I not got the slides? Sorry. Let's flip back across the slides. Excellent. I'd just like to draw your attention to some new research that's coming out of our Futures Education team. So there's a new paper available about barriers to participation in engineering and the value of interventions to improve diversity. Now, that's not actually publicly available yet, but if this is a paper that interests you, please contact the Education Futures team via their website, and they're happy to share that paper with you. Finally, we'd just like to thank you for your participation and your interest tonight. And as always, we'd like to hear your feedback to ensure that we continue to offer some areas of interest for you. So if you are happy to go and fill out the SurveyMonkey form to tell us what you'd like to hear about in 2020, we'd really appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add on? You've got some flyers about a short course that we're at Monash are offering, the Coding and Robotics in Early Childhood Education. So feel free to look into these programs that we endeavour to plan and translate research into practice. So this is one of the segue to partnerships. Thank
Excellent.
you.
And I think I saw those on the tables, didn't I? So feel free, I think they've been put onto some of the tables. Feel free to try and pick one up on your way out. Thank you again for your participation tonight. And once again, can you join me in thanking our panellists? Thank you very much.